is the Nectar of Instruction by Srila Rupa Goswami. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder and Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It's actually one of the most valuable books that we have in our whole pantheon of deities that are these books written by Srila Prabhupada. It's really one of the most valuable sources, practical sort of guidebook for your spiritual advancement. And there are so many things we could talk about. It would be great to talk about the whole book, but there's just not enough time. In particular, I would like to share with you one of Srila Prabhupada's most powerful purports, I think, in all of his books, text number 5. Why is that? This Nectar of Instruction, or Upadeshamritam, it contains everything you need to know about spiritual life, all the way from A to Z, all the way from controlling your senses to entering Ras Leela. Everything is there. So anything at any stage that you might need for making spiritual advancement, Srila Rupa Goswami has that advice. A little bit too fun. So I thought, let's talk about text number 5, because this is very practical information. It addresses people who have already adopted Krishna consciousness and need to know how do we deal with one another. That's always an important topic. So I'll just recite the Sanskrit. Krishneti yasya giritam manasadriyeta dikshasti chet pranadebhishya bhajantamisham Shushushaya bhajana vigyamananyamanya Nindani shunya hridami sita sangalabhya. That means one should mentally honor the devotee who chants the holy name of Lord Krishna. One should offer humble obeisances to the devotee who has undergone spiritual initiation, Diksha, and is engaged in worshiping the deities. And one should associate with and faithfully serve that pure devotee who is advanced in undeviating devotional service and whose heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. Why don't we repeat this, because it's worth repeating. One should mentally honor the devotee who chants the holy name of Lord Krishna. One should offer humble obeisances to the devotee who has undergone spiritual initiation, Diksha, and is engaged in worshiping the deity. And one should associate with and faithfully serve that pure devotee who is advanced in undeviating devotional service and whose heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. Purport by His Divine Grace. In order to intelligently apply the 6-fold loving reciprocations mentioned in the previous verse, one must select proper persons with careful discrimination. Okay. How many people are familiar with the contents of this book? Raise your hands. Maybe half of you. So let's just review the previous text that Prabhupada references here. It gives us a simple formula. It's actually, seems to me, easier in Sanskrit than in English. Dadati pratigrishnati, guhyam akhyati prachyatim, bhunkte bhojyate chaiva, shadvidham priti lakshanam. So you have three pairs and six activities that we engage in with the devotees. We give devotees gifts and we accept gifts from devotees. We inquire from devotees humbly and we reveal our minds in confidence. And we share prasadam with devotees and we accept prasadam from devotees. These are the 6 loving exchanges that characterize dealings between devotees. And Srila Prabhupada is telling us in tonight's verse, in order to intelligently apply these 6, one has to select the proper person with careful discrimination. Discrimination. Discrimination is a bad word in ordinary parlance. It almost always means, looking down on somebody. But actually, it's very necessary to discriminate, because there are people in this world, unfortunately, that you cannot trust. Certainly you have encountered some. Everyone does. So we have to use our brain, and we have to carefully discriminate, not idly, or not just for the purpose of finding faults or trying to discredit people unfairly or trying to get people out of your way so that you can take their position. Not like that. But we have to discriminate who's going to help me to make spiritual advancement while I can in this human form of life. Discrimination is, what do we call discrimination in Sanskrit? Easy word. Everybody knows. Viveka. You may have several words for it, but Viveka comes to mind. So discrimination. Now, that's for Prabhupada's first sentence. The first sentence is enough for a whole lecture, practically speaking. So let's go on. He says, the point being here that in order to actually engage in these sixfold loving exchanges, we have to do so very selectively. That's the point. Next thing he says, Rupa Goswami therefore advises that we should meet with the Vaishnavas in an appropriate way according to their particular status. Status, this is another thing. There's a hierarchy. It's a stratified system here. Some people you want to associate with and faithfully serve, some people you want to respect externally, and other people you just want to respect them internally, because if you respect them externally, they may take advantage. It happens. Okay, so we should meet with devotees in an appropriate way. Bhaktivinoda Thakur prays for this ability. Where does he pray for this ability? Anybody know the song I'm thinking about? Simple bit. You tell me the lines.
Chaya Vega Domi, Chaya Dosha Sumi, Chaya.
You're very warm, but not quite there yet.
Chaya Sadhusanga?
Right author, wrong song.
Oh.
Shakale Shamman, Korite Shakti. Dehonata. How? Dehonata Kese. Jata. Yes, according to their station. Let me show them the respect. This is what he's talking about. So you can't approach if you approach a Paramahamsa Vaishnava, Uttama Adhikari, should you just respect that person in your mind? No. If you approach a neophyte devotee who is full of anarthas, should you associate with and faithfully serve that person? No. Everything has to match. Sway adhikare ya nishtasa guna parikirtitaha. Krishna tells Uddhava in the 11th canto. Each and every person, you have to deal with them according to the adhikar, according to your own adhikar and according to their adhikar also. It has to match. So this is the formula given here. And it's assumed, Srila Prabhupada continues. In this verse, he tells us how to deal with three types of devotees. The Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, and Uttama Adhikari. This is a very important thing also. That we're talking about gradations of devotees. So there's the Kanishta. What does Kanishta mean? The youngest. Madhyama, middle, intermediate, and Uttama, the topmost. That's pretty simple. All right, so the Kanishta Adhikari is a neophyte who has received the Harinam initiation from the spiritual master and is trying to chant the holy name of Krishna. Note, Srila Prabhupada says he's trying to chant the holy name of Krishna. He's not necessarily doing so yet. How can we make that claim? We hear him every day. He's chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. But sometimes it comes out like shnik shnik ne 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 mama mama shnik shnik ne mama mama. So this is in the beginning. This is how we chant. And even if our tongues are saying shnik shnik ne mama mama, but the mind is on something else. Many of you are from the Hyderabad area, so you'll be pleased to know that in Uppal, everybody knows where Uppal is, outside of Hyderabad. There's a Venkatanath temple there, Srinivas. And I went there and was chatting with the Pujari one day. So he quoted one verse, very nice verse. What did he say? He said, Manasyekam vachasyekam karmanyekam mahatmanaha. For the great soul, what he's thinking, what he's speaking, and what he's doing, all one, all the same thing. And what is the alternative? Manasyanyam vachasyanyam karmanyanyam duratmanaha. That he's thinking one thing, he's saying a second thing, and he's doing something else. This is a rascal. So we have to develop this ability to focus. And therefore Prabhupada says the Kanishta Adhikari, he's not adept yet. Neither can he pronounce the mantra properly half the time, and neither is he paying attention half the time. So he's trying his best. And hote through this practice, he'll eventually become perfect. Maybe we're in that category, or maybe we're close enough to it that we can relate. So that's Kanishta. And generally what is it that determines which adhikar you fit into? Anybody know? Whether you're Kanishta or Madhyam or Uttama, what is it that determines your status?
Faith.
Your faith. Your faith. How deep is your faith? We've been discussing faith the last few days. Everybody has faith, but the Kanishta Adhikari's faith is splayed. Some things he's putting some of his faith in Krishna, but he's putting a lot of his faith in other things. And so he's not quite there yet. So this is the thing. And what are some other symptoms? The Kanishta Adhikari, he thinks that Krishna is only in the temple, and once I leave the temple, then everything is Maya. That's what he thinks. And he also thinks that I'm the only one who's really serious devotee here, and everybody else is just, neophyte. They just don't appreciate me yet. This is Kanishta, this is the mentality of the neophyte devotee. So he can't find Krishna outside the temple. In fact, he doesn't want Krishna outside the temple. He wants Krishna to stay in the box so that he doesn't have to surrender. So Kanishta Adhikaris are of this nature. And he's very weak in his knowledge of the Shastra. Why? Because he's not reading the Shastra. Because his faith is invested elsewhere. That's why. So Kanishta Adhikari has these symptoms. Madhyama Adhikari has received spiritual initiation. Oh, I'm sorry. Prabhupada here continues. He says, one should respect the Kanishta Adhikari within his mind. Madhyama Adhikari has received spiritual initiation from the spiritual master and has been fully engaged by him in the transcendental loving service. Do you remember last night we discussed this? Here you go again. This is one of the Prabhupada's set formulaic phrases that you hear all the time, every third page. Transcendental loving service, we explained it the other night. If you're curious about it, you can go back and listen. In a nutshell, we can say your devotional service, first of all, has to be enacted on the transcendental platform, which means you have to at least believe that you're not your body. And you have to have some degree of affection, or you have to at least try to show some affection, and you have to do something practical, these three things. So, the Madhyama Adhikari has received a spiritual initiation and he's engaged by the spiritual master. He should be considered to be situated midway in devotional service. He's not just brand new neophyte, and he's not an Uttama Adhikari either. Don't snag it on the microphone. So Madhyam, he's in the middle, intermediate, as we said. Okay, the Madhyama Adhikari, he is generally engaged in preaching work also. I'm just elaborating here. And he knows the Shastra better than the Kanishta Adhikari, but not as good as the Uttama Adhikari. And his faith is strong, but sometimes he gets confused because it's not perfect. He's better than the Kanishta, but he's not as good as the Uttama. So his faith is somewhere in the middle, his knowledge of Shastra is somewhere in the middle, his devotion, his faith, everything is in the middle. Okay, Prabhupada continues. The Uttama Adhikari, or the highest devotee, is one who is very advanced in devotional service. And Uttama Adhikari is not interested in blaspheming others. His heart is completely clean. And he has attained the realized state of unalloyed Krishna consciousness. How much meaning can you cram into one sentence? All glories to Srila Prabhupada, because he's done it again. The first sentence was really quite something we described, and here's another one. Why is he not interested in blaspheming others? Because he's above that. His heart is completely absorbed in love. He has no... Paupers are the ones who are required to blaspheme others or criticize others because they're so poor themselves, somebody might notice, unless they're putting down everybody around them. So the Uttama Adhikari is way beyond that. He doesn't think about such petty things because his heart is completely cleansed. How is the heart cleansed? We heard this last night.
Hearing.
By hearing, by chanting both, yes. Puta madbhavamagaraha. He's purified by the austerity of knowledge, according to chapter 4, text 10. Okay, so, and he's realized a state of unalloyed Krishna consciousness. Okay, two more things here. Number one, it's not just theoretical for him. He's actually realized it. How do you realize things beyond theory? How do you realize that? You do it. Kinchit karomi. So, and his Krishna consciousness is also what? Unalloyed. This is another one of those phrases that Prabhupada uses all the time. Unalloyed. If you have an alloy, it means there's a mixture, is it not?
Yes.
But Rupa Goswami defines pure devotional service, no mix. It's not mixed with karma, it's not mixed with gyan, it's just bhakti. The Uttama Adhikari has that deep faith, and he's acting on that faith, and he's realized that faith, therefore, this is the person that you should associate with and faithfully serve. Because if you do this with a person who's less advanced, you'll get pulled down to his level. And if you don't do it with a person who is advanced, you'll never advance yourself. So these are important instructions. According to Srila Rupa Goswami, the association and service of such a Mahabhagavata or perfect Vaishnava are most desirable. One should not remain a Kanishta Adhikari. If you are a Kanishta Adhikari right now, you don't have to raise your hand and identify yourself in public. But just consider these things and locate yourself somewhere within this spectrum. And now you have to consider, what am I going to do about this? Prabhupada is here telling us, one should not remain a Kanishta Adhikari, or one who is situated on the lowest platform of devotional service and is interested only in worshiping the deity in the temple. Such a devotee is described in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 2, text number 47. These are very famous verses. In case you're wondering, where do these three categories of devotees come from? This is where they come from. Prabhupada is he's exemplifying what he instructs us to do in Bhagavad Gita chapter 17, text 15. Anybody know that verse? Anudvegakaram vakyam satyam chayati. Yes. So what does he say in the purport? Anything you're proposing about spiritual life, you have to back it up immediately with reference to an authority. Prabhupada told us in 1976, there was a court case going on trying to prove that Hare Krishna devotees are a newfangled cult out to brainwash impressionable young children, and that we're not a bona fide religion. This was the accusation. And somehow or other, people were so ignorant in 1976 that this case made it up to the Supreme Court, which is surprising. But eventually the judge threw it out of court, because he could see that by the time you're a Supreme Court justice, you're usually pretty smart. So Prabhupada actually told us, you should bring a table into the courtroom, put all my books on top of the table, and enter it. This is Exhibit A. This is our evidence. And whatever they say, just pick up the book and show it to them. Now, what's required to do that? Huh? You have to know the books. Prabhupada told us, you have to know these books just as much as a lawyer knows his law books. Once in Mumbai, Tamal Krishna Goswami, he was really overworked, as was common with him. And he went to Srila Prabhupada and he said, Srila Prabhupada, I haven't read your books for a month, but I've memorized the Mumbai municipal codes all the way back to 1936. And Prabhupada didn't cut him any slack even then. What did he say? Remember this? Sleep less. Hare Krishna. This is where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. If you're really a disciple and your guru tells you something like this, you've got to surrender. There's no easy way out. Okay, so this was Prabhupada's instruction, that just learn these books the way a lawyer knows his law books, and that is what distinguishes, that's one of the symptoms that distinguishes the Kanishta from the Madhyama from the Uttama Adhikari. Uttama Adhikari is solid. No matter what you throw at him, he's got an immediate answer. Somebody came to Prabhupada once and they said, Swamiji, it said that the spiritual master is, the most intelligent, or he knows everything, something like this. Prabhupada said, yes. So the person then threw at Prabhupada, okay, so how many windows are there in the Empire State Building? And Prabhupada didn't miss a beat. Without hesitating even 1 second, he shot back, how many drops of water are there in a mirage? Raise your hand if you could have answered like that. This is realized knowledge. This is the difference between an Uttama Adhikari and a Madhyama Adhikari. Even as a Madhyama Adhikari, there's not that many people who could give an answer like that. Prabhupada is realized. So here Prabhupada is quoting from the Bhagavatam as the exemplary Acharya. Acharya means Achinoti tu shastrartham. Acharat stapayati. The Acharya has to teach by his example. And this is what Prabhupada is doing for us here. This is something that is only written in between the lines here. That's why I'm pointing it out. All right, having said all this, Srila Prabhupada is telling us who is the Kanishta Adhikari. It's described in 11.247. Archayame vahariye pujam yashvathaye hate. Natad bhakteshu chanyeshu sabhakta prakritah smrataha. A person who's very faithfully engaged in the worship of the deity in the temple, but who does not know how to behave towards devotees or people in general, is called a prakrita bhakta or kanishta adhikari. Now, what does it mean to say that you are a prakrita bhakta? What does that mean? Prakrita, what does prakrita mean? Yeah, material. It means natural. I mean, you can say, but what kind of nature? Material nature. So we're material devotees. Sometimes our acharyas have called this bhaktabhasa. Shadows, resembling a devotee. And we practice bhakti abhas and we chant nama abhas, everything abhas. Things aren't what they, in an age of deep fakes especially, things aren't always what they seem. So be careful. This is why you have to discriminate. Because somebody may actually be a bhaktabhas, shadow devotee, or imitation devotee, whatever, how you want to translate it. But Prabhupada is telling us, no, you have to read these books, you have to understand the philosophy, you have to use your brain to figure out who's in what situation. And it's difficult to do that. Sometimes it's a little bit subjective, and so you have to be careful. How careful? Tulasi is a sansara mein sabse miliya bhai. Na jane kis roop mein Narayan mila jaye. There was one story in Guru Vayur. Maybe it was Narayan Bhattacharya, I don't remember, but somebody was one of the priests there. No, this is later. This is in the 20s or 30s when they first opened up that temple to allow everybody in. Previously, you couldn't even get in that temple unless you're a Nambudri. Brahmin. So when they allowed everybody, whole public inside, one priest was just, he was anxious because all these people are pushing and shoving, and they're so strict there that they don't want to be contaminated. They take their deity worship very seriously. So he was just thinking in his mind, all these people, it's a problem, what to do, Lord, help me out. And so the Lord helped him out. How did the Lord help him out? Immediately he saw every single one of those people jostling in the crowd had 4 arms. True story. You can make of it what you will, but the point is you don't know who you're dealing with all the time. Sometimes you may be treating an Uttama Adhikari as if he's a Prakrita Bhakta. And sometimes you may be treating a Prakrita Bhakta as if he were an Uttama Adhikari. This is what happens when we do not read Prabhupada's books, because we don't have mature intelligence to discriminate, as Prabhupada is suggesting here. What is the first sentence? Let's read it again. Anybody remember what he said? This is a pop quiz. In order to intelligently apply the 6-fold loving reciprocations mentioned in text 4, one must select proper persons with careful discrimination. So these verses will help us to do that. So we're talking about the Kanishta Adhikari now. And Srila Prabhupada is he's quoting Bhagavatam. One therefore has to raise himself to the position of Kanishta, from the position of Kanishta Adhikari to the platform of Madhyam Adhikari. The Madhyam Adhikari is described in Srimad Bhagavatam, same chapter, a text earlier, in this way. Ishware tadadhineshu badisheshu tursatsu cha prema maitri kripo pekshaya karoti samadhyamaha. The Madhyama Adhikari is a devotee who worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the highest object of love. He makes friends with the Lord's devotees. He's merciful to the ignorant, and he avoids those who are envious by nature. So 4 things that we have to do with our discrimination. Once we have that discrimination, where do you get the discrimination from? From Prabhupada's books. That is the intelligence that we have. So 4 things. We love Krishna. We befriend the devotees. We show mercy to those who are innocent, and we avoid the envious. We have to know how to do this and when to do this and where. And that requires careful discrimination. This is the way to cultivate devotional service properly. Therefore, in this verse, Srila Rupa Goswami has advised us how to treat various devotees. We can see from practical experience that there are different types of Vaishnavas. The Prakrita Sahajiyas generally chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and yet they are attached to women, money, and intoxication. Although such persons may chant the holy name of the Lord, they're not yet properly purified. Such people should be respected within one's mind, but their association should be avoided. Not everybody who claims to be a devotee or wears tilak and kantimala is necessarily that advanced. It's not even that they necessarily want to make advancements. Sometimes they don't. And we have to be able to see who is who and what is what. Prabhupada goes on to say, those who are innocent but simply carried away by bad association should be shown favor if they are eager to receive proper instructions from pure devotees. But those neophyte devotees who are actually initiated by the bona fide spiritual master and are seriously engaged in carrying out the order of the spiritual master should be offered respectful obeisances. That means, bow down, mister. Anybody ever heard that song? Boy George, he used to come to our restaurant in Soho, London, and he used to visit the temple there, and he used to see that all these people are coming. They don't bow down. They come to visit the temple as if it's just, as if Krishna is standing there smiling just for their infotainment. So, he wrote that song therefore. All right, but so we have to discriminate. Sometimes people may appear to be devotees, but they're not really that serious, and they're not therefore free from their anarthas, and therefore they can't help us either. But if someone is seriously engaged and initiated and engaged in service by his spiritual master, following his orders sincerely, we bow down to that person. In this Krishna consciousness movement, a chance is given to everyone without discrimination of caste, creed, or color. Without discrimination. You got it? So we discriminate without discrimination. You can do all things in Krishna consciousness because the nature of absolute truth is achintya veda veda. All right. And then he gives the example of whom? Anybody know this purport? George Harrison, another member of the Beatles. Prabhupada said he's a neophyte. Everyone is invited to join this movement, sit with us, take prasadam, and hear about Krishna. When we see that someone is actually interested in Krishna consciousness and wants to be initiated, we accept him as a disciple for the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. When a neophyte devotee is actually initiated and engaged in devotional service by the orders of the spiritual master, he should be accepted immediately as a bona fide Vaishnava, and obeisance should be offered unto him. Out of many such Vaishnavas, one may be found to be very seriously engaged in the service of the Lord and strictly following all the regulative principles, chanting the prescribed number of rounds on japa beads, and always thinking of how to expand the Krishna consciousness movement. Such a Vaishnava should be accepted as an Uttama Adhikari or highly advanced devotee, and his association should always be sought. So this is called Samadhi. Prabhupada writes in 1/10 canto purport. If you're always focused on how to distribute more of Srila Prabhupada's books, including to yourself, that is Samadhi, Prabhupada said. So the process by which a devotee becomes attached to Krishna is described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antilila, chapter 4, text 192. At the time of initiation, when a devotee fully surrenders to the service of the Lord, Krishna accepts him to be as good as himself. Diksha or spiritual initiation is explained by Jiva Goswami in his Bhakti Sandarbha. Divyam jnanam yato dadyat kuryat papasya sankshayam tasmad diksheti saprokta deshikais tatvako vidayehi. By Diksha, one gradually becomes disinterested in material enjoyment and gradually becomes interested in spiritual life. We've seen many practical examples of this, especially in Europe and America. Many students who come to us from rich and respectable families quickly lose all interest in material enjoyment and become very eager to enter into spiritual life. Although they come from very wealthy families, many of them accept living conditions that are not very comfortable. Indeed, for Krishna's sake, they are prepared to accept any living condition as long as they can live in the temple and associate with the Vaishnavas. What's a favorite example? I can think of so many. Huh?
I guess he never lived at the temple.
No, this is, we're probably talking about ISKCON. What about Giriraj Swami? Jew temple, they were living in a tin shack. Were you there, Jagat Purush?
Yes.
So he just ask him. And the rats are nibbling at their toes while they're sleeping at night.
Deal.
Yeah, whatever. Bad enough. Or what's another one? My God, brother Saurabh. Put up here.
Vrindavan.
Yeah, Vrindavan architect. Actually, he wasn't an architect, but Prabhupada made him an architect. And he did it. Wonderful temple. Everybody loves it. We've had a 300% increase in pilgrims in Vrindavan just since the pandemic ended. Every day is like Janmashtami. Every day. It's wild. Sometimes you need a hydraulic drill to get into the temple room. Anyway, so Surabhi, when they were building the place, he was sleeping in a jhompari because nobody had anything. Just a thatch hut, and there's no question of AC. There's no clean water half the time. So one night he said he woke up and he was lying on his cot. He opens his eyes and he sees 6 inches from his face, there's a king cobra staring back at him. That's austerity. You see? So this kind of thing. Prabhupada is referring to this. You think it's not on Prabhupada's mind? He knows exactly what they're doing. When I was on Radha Damodar, here, in the winter of 1976, Chapel Hill, we stayed in a campground of America. Do they still have those places here? KOA campground. Yeah, maybe not. But we went to take shower in the bathroom facilities in the campground, and all the pipes were frozen because it was winter, snowing. And so Drishaduna Maharaj told us, okay, there's a swimming pool there. Go break the ice on the swimming pool and take, cut open a milk carton and just pour it over yourself like this. And that's what we did. This was in the winter of 1976, right here. I did this. So Prabhupada said, therefore, he said, I'm always thinking about those boys in the vans who are distributing his books. I just came from Atlanta. I told you last night also. The boys there are doing the same thing that we were doing at this time. All brahmacharis, young men, dedicated to book distribution because they know this is the only thing that can help anyone really in the modern world. Nobody's doing anything else that's going to help anyone actually. But these men are all great souls, and Prabhupada is thinking about them and blessing them. And here he's writing about them. So when one becomes so disinterested in material enjoyment, he becomes fit for initiation by the spiritual master. And for the advancement of spiritual life, Srimad Bhagavatam prescribes. Anybody know? Tapasa brahmacharena yamena cha. What is that? Shamena cha damena cha. When a person is serious about accepting Diksha, he must be prepared to practice austerity, celibacy, and control of the mind and body. If one is so prepared and is desirous of receiving spiritual enlightenment, Divyam Jnanam, he is fit for being initiated. Divyam Jnanam is technically called Tadvigyana, or knowledge about the Supreme. Anybody know this verse from Mundaka Upanishad? Pariksha lokan karmachitan brahmano nirvedamayan nasya krata kritena tadvigyanartam sagurum evadagatet samit pani shrotrim brahmanishtam. What does it mean? Pariksha lokan, having surveyed all avenues that life has to offer us, and considering, wait a minute, there's nothing here that's not just karma. It's either my karma or his karma or that one's karma. What's karma plus karma?
More karma.
Karma. Karma minus karma? Still karma. When somebody gets it, then tadvigyanartam saguruma avigatet. Then you have to approach a spiritual master. Understand what's beyond this relative stuff, what's real. So that person can be initiated. When one is interested in the transcendental subject matter of the absolute truth, he should be initiated. Such a person should approach a spiritual master in order to take Diksha. Srimad Bhagavatam also prescribes, Tasmat Gurum Prapadyeta Jigyasu Shreya Uttamam. When one is actually interested in the transcendental science of the absolute truth, he should approach a spiritual master. Shreya Uttamam, the highest benefit for anyone. This is why we accept initiation. One should not accept a spiritual master without following his instructions. For example, if the spiritual master says, implement Varnashram, and we don't do anything even after half a century, that's not very good. It looks to me a lot like Gurora, which is one of the 10 offenses that we read this morning in Apex. So this is we have to take this very seriously. Nor should one accept a spiritual master just to make a fashionable show of spiritual life. Prabhupada used to call this what? Pet guru. Everyone has a pet guru, right? Yeah, this is my Guruji. Yeah. It's like, here's my pet. Sometimes we also see everybody, all my friends are initiated by Guru X, so I'm going to be initiated by Guru X. Or I like the way Guru Y sings, therefore he's my guru. Or all wrong reasons people take initiation, all the wrong reasons. It's better not to be initiated than to be initiated for the wrong reason if you're not serious. Prabhupada is telling here. But you should take initiation. It's not acceptable to not take initiation. Your life will not be perfect unless you take spiritual initiation. But do it right. And Prabhupada is telling us how. One must be jignasu, very much inquisitive to learn from the bona fide spiritual master. The inquiries one makes should strictly pertain to the transcendental science. Jignasu shreya uttamam. How is it that somebody can be so eager, so jignasu, but he doesn't open one of Prabhupada's books? Tell me how. How is it that a person sings sometimes in the morning? Guru Mukhapadma Bhaktu Chitete Kori Aikya Arana Kori Homani Asha. Which part do you not understand? Let the words emanating from my Guru's mouth be the same thing that I'm cherishing in my heart, and let me not be distracted by anything else. That's what he's praying. How can such a person not open Prabhupada's books? You tell me. It better be good. So, the word uttamam refers to that which is above material knowledge. Tama means the darkness of the material world, and ut means transcendental. Generally, people are very interested in inquiring about mundane subject matters, but when one has lost such interest and is simply interested in transcendental subject matters, he is quite fit for being initiated. When one is actually initiated by the bona fide spiritual master, and when he seriously engages in the service of the Lord, he should be accepted as a madhyama adhikari. So, are you getting the idea how serious it is to be a madhyama adhikari? It's a little bit serious. The chanting of the holy names of Krishna is so sublime that if one chants the Hare Krishna Mahamantra offenselessly, carefully avoiding the 10 offenses, he can certainly be gradually elevated to the point of understanding that there is no difference between the holy name of the Lord and the Lord himself. One who has reached such an understanding should be very much respected by neophyte devotees. One should know for certain that without chanting the holy name of the Lord offenselessly, one cannot be a proper candidate for the advancement in Krishna consciousness. In Chaitanya Charitamrita it said, Madhya Lila chapter 22, text 69, Jahara komala shraddha shekarnishtha jan, krame krame teho bhakta haide uttam. One whose faith is soft and pliable is called a neophyte, but by gradually following the process, he will rise to the platform of first-class devotee. You children have to go somewhere else. You're making too much noise, please. Life would not be very delightful without children. Everyone begins his devotional life from the neophyte stage, but if one properly finishes chanting the prescribed number of rounds of Harinam, he is elevated step by step to the highest platform, Uttama Adhikari. And that's a promise from Srila Prabhupada here in this purport. The Krishna consciousness movement prescribes 16 rounds daily because people in Western countries cannot concentrate for long periods while chanting on beads. Therefore, the minimum number of rounds is prescribed. Sometimes people say, oh, 16 rounds is just way too much. Can you do something less? Believe it or not, in Vrindavan, there was one class. The class was about, I think, Dharma Shastras and all, kinds of vidhis and rules and regulations you have to follow. So, somebody raised their hand at the end of the class and they said, Prabhuji, is there any set of Shastras for those who cannot follow the Dharma Shastras? And the speaker was very sharp. The speaker just shot right back again. You said, you mean you want a criminal code for criminals, right? So actually the real thing is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to say that unless one chants at least 64 rounds of japa, that's 100,000 names. then he's considered fallen. According to his calculation, practically every one of us is fallen. But because we're trying to serve the Supreme Lord with all seriousness and without duplicity, these are the things. You have to be serious and you have to be free from duplicity. Otherwise, no guarantees. Then we can expect the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is famous as Patit Pavan, the deliverer of the fallen. Even if we're chanting 16 rounds, it's not like we're not still fallen. But he's Patit Pavan. If he sees that we're serious, at least enough to do that, then he'll show us mercy. Satyaraj Khan was a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya. He asked him, how do you identify a Vaishnava? And Mahaprabhu answered, if someone chants the holy name even once, he's the best man out of the crowd. So one who is interested in chanting the holy name of Krishna, or who by practice likes to chant Krishna's names, should be accepted as a Vaishnava and offered respects as such, at least within the mind. This is also from Chaitanya Charitamrita. So one of our dear friends, famous English musician, we've described already, Prabhupada gives his example of George Harrison. He considers he's bona fide Kanishta Adhikari. And he says the conclusion is that anyone who's trying to advance in Krishna consciousness by regularly chanting the holy name should always be respected by Vaishnavas. On the other hand, we've witnessed that some of our contemporaries who are supposed to be great preachers have gradually fallen into the material conception of life because they have failed to chant the holy name of the Lord. This is true everywhere and always. If you don't follow this process, you will end up just like all the others who did not follow the process. And if you do follow the process, you will end up just like all the others who did follow the process. It is guaranteed. So while giving instructions to Sanatana Goswami, Lord Chaitanya divided devotional service into these three categories. This is another definition. A person whose conclusive knowledge of the Shastras is not very strong, but who has developed firm faith in chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and who is also undeterred in the execution of his prescribed devotional service should be considered a Madhyama Adhikari. Such a person is very fortunate. So that's another definition of Madhyama Adhikari. Madhyama Adhikari is a Shraddhavan, a staunchly faithful person. And he's actually a candidate for further advancement. Therefore, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it says, Shraddhavana jana hai bhakti adhikari uttama madhyama kanishta shraddhanusari. One becomes qualified as a devotee on the elementary platform, the intermediate platform, and the highest platform of devotional service, according to the development of faith. Again, Shraddha Shabde Vishvasha Kohe Suradha Nishchay Krishna Bhakti Kaile Sarva Karma Krita Hoy. Shraddha is confident, firm faith that by rendering transcendental loving service, there's that phrase again, to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. He needs to be quiet. The little boy in the way in the back, he's playing with plastic cup and it's making noise. So such faith is favorable to the discharge of devotional service. Shraddha, faith in Krishna, is the beginning of Krishna consciousness. Faith means strong faith. The words of Bhagavad Gita are authoritative instructions for faithful men. And whatever Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita is to be accepted as it is, without interpretation. This was the way Arjuna accepted the Bhagavad Gita. After hearing the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna told Krishna, Sarvam etad rutam manye yanmam varasi keshava. Oh Krishna, I totally accept as truth all that you have told me. Why is Prabhupada saying this? Why is he telling, well, what is this paragraph for? What is the point of this paragraph, first of all? He's talking about faith. Why is he mentioning this?
It's a determining factor for them. classification.
Yes, faith is everything. Adao Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sango Bhajana Kriya. It's the beginning of all the 9 stages that we have to go through before we get prema. And since it's the factor that determines our status as Madhyama, Kanishta, or Uttama, it's very important that we understand what faith is. That's why Prabhupada is explaining this. You have to accept whatever the authority says without interpretation. And you have to accept everything, not just the parts that you like. This is another fashion sometimes. You know, generally it's the same people, the same ones who take initiation for the wrong reasons. They're the ones who accept only part of what is being taught, you know, because the sincerity is not there, the faith isn't really there that much. So that is the correct way of understanding, just as Arjun did. Oh Krishna, I totally accept as truth all that you've told me. This is called Shruta. It's not that one accepts a portion of the Bhagavad Gita according to his own whimsical interpretations and then rejects another portion. This is not Shraddha. Shraddha means accepting the instructions of Bhagavad Gita in their totality, especially the last instruction, Sarva Dharman Paritijya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. Just abandon all varieties of religion and surrender to me. When one becomes completely faithful in regard to this instruction, one's strong faith becomes the basis for advancing in spiritual life. When one fully engages in chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, he gradually realizes his own spiritual identity. Unless one faithfully chants the Hare Krishna mantra, Krishna does not reveal himself. We cannot realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead by artificial means. We must engage faithfully in the service of the Lord. Such service begins with the tongue, which means that we should always chant the holy names of the Lord and
Except Krishna.
that's the easy part, right? We should not chant or accept anything else. When this process is faithfully followed, the Supreme Lord reveals himself. So if you haven't seen Krishna yet, just consider, where's the problem? The process is perfect. There must be some flaw in my following. Otherwise, Krishna should be revealing himself. Somebody once asked Prabhupada, how do we know when Krishna is pleased with our service? You know what Prabhupada told them? When he tells you. Prabhupada was so sharp. He was so sharp. That's what he said. So, very wild up there. When a person realizes himself to be an eternal servitor of Krishna, he loses interest in everything but Krishna's service. Always thinking of Krishna, devising means by which to spread the holy name of Krishna, he understands that his only business is in spreading the Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. Such a person is to be recognized as an Uttama Adhikari. It sounds a whole lot like Srila Prabhupada, doesn't it? And his association should be immediately accepted according to the 6 processes. Indeed, the advanced Uttama Adhikari Vaishnava devotee should be accepted as a spiritual master. Everything one possesses should be offered to him, for it is enjoined that one should deliver whatever he has to the spiritual master. The brahmachari in particular is supposed to beg alms from others and offer them to the spiritual master. However, one should not imitate the behavior of an advanced devotee or Mahabhagavata without being self-realized. For by such imitation, one will eventually become degraded. We have seen this. People who try to imitate, they fall down and they're gone. In this verse, Srila Rupa Goswami advises the devotee to be intelligent enough to distinguish between the Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, and Uttama Adhikari. The devotee should also know his own position and should not try to imitate a devotee situated on a higher platform. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given some practical hints to the effect that an Uttama Adhikari Vaishnava can be recognized by his ability to convert many fallen souls to Vaishnavism. That again sounds a lot like Srila Prabhupada, doesn't it? One should not become a spiritual master unless he has attained the platform of Uttama Adhikari. This is another thing. Very weighty instruction from Srila Prabhupada. A neophyte Vaishnava or a Vaishnava situated on the intermediate platform can also accept disciples, but such disciples must be on the same platform, and it should be understood that they cannot advance very well toward the ultimate goal of life under his insufficient guidance. These are heavy statements, aren't they? When these words were written in 1976, none of us had much insight into how important these instructions are. But now in 2023, it means something very different, doesn't it? Same words. What's different? Us. So, therefore, a disciple should be careful to accept an Uttama Adhikari as a spiritual master. Wonderful, wonderful purport by Srila Prabhupada. He's done it again. All we have to do is read Srila Prabhupada's books every day, and we will find such gems everywhere. So many that we are fabulously wealthy only by his divine grace. Srila Prabhupada stayed up all night writing these books just so that we could sit here and read them half a century later. We should show our gratitude by doing so regularly, daily. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Okay, so these are 3 ways that we can associate with devotees and show these 6 loving exchanges with them. We have to consider the 3 adhikars, and we have to consider, all these aspects that are involved. Very, very important instructions. Anybody have any questions or any comments? Yes, please.
One way to look at the nectar of instruction is kind of like the Shikshastika. The first sloka is like the very neophyte, and then the last sloka is the very, very, very advanced.
Yeah.
So in the very first sloka, it's described basically the one who can control his senses is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So sense control is the foundation, and then love of Godhead in the mood of the gopis is the pinnacle. So it seems like an apparent contradiction here, because it seems like a neophyte, on a very base level, this he's controlling his senses, he can accept disciples. But here we're hearing how once you be an Uttama Adhikari.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I would say that, yeah, it looks like all you have to do is control your senses, and then you can accept disciples, right? But it's not so easy as that. And I would say that this sense control is not so much the foundation of advancement or advanced spiritual life as it is the evidence of advancement. In that sense, it's the foundation. When Arjuna asks Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, how am I going to recognize somebody who's actually spiritually realized? What's the first thing Krishna says? Yeah, he's controlled his senses, basically. If he's given up sense gratification. Now, how do you know he's given up sense gratification unless he's following the standard rules and regulations that are given in the Shastra? Tasmat Shastram Pramanam Te Karya Karya Vijanataha. You should understand what to do and what not to do on the basis of what the Shastra enjoins. If somebody's following Shastric ideals, then he's okay. Maybe. Even then, it's still a little bit subjective. But at least he's following. He's a civilized human being, at least. So that's how I would put it. As I see it, the first text of this work is meant to underscore the very primary importance of being a bona fide human being, because human status is not biologically defined. It's defined in terms of your adherence to Dharma. If you adhere to Dharma, you are a human being. If you are not adhering to Dharma, you are not a human being. Even if you're a biologically correct human being with, upright walking, 2 legs, and, advanced intelligence. But if your intelligence is all misused and abused and invested in the wrong account, we call this dvipada pashu, 2-legged human, not the same thing.
2-legged animal.
Two-legged animal. So then the real thing is, the test, I should say, is this sense control. In that sense, you can know who's capable. The point is that somebody who passes as a spiritual master, but is not capable of controlling his senses, he's also not capable of being a spiritual master, and you should ignore him. That's how I see it. You want to add something, Prabhuji? Yeah.
Well, I've thought about this myself, and the control of the senses is not a simple thing.
That's also, yeah.
One who controls the senses is a Goswami. And one cannot be a Goswami unless one is a Uttamadhikari.
Yeah.
So this is really describing in the very first verse, an Uttamadhikari.
Yeah,
But it's leading, I think, for those of us on the very, mediocre platform, it's leading us with language that we can relate to into this this path.
Yeah, it's just like Prabhupada used to say, just chant Hare Krishna and be happy. That's all you have to do. But once we start trying to do it, we encounter problems, and then the spiritual master has to explain things, and then we see it's really, it's a little deeper than it looks. So yeah.
I have a perspective on this also. That, one may control the senses, but if one's not self-realized and has a relationship with Krishna, his controlling the senses will be temporary.
Yeah.
Because we're by nature pleasure seeking. And if we're not getting pleasure in relationship to in relation to our relationship with Krishna, then we're going to be going after pleasure in relationship to the senses.
That's his point, I think. It's not so easy, actually.
Yeah. So it's a matter of the condition of the heart.
Yeah.
And if someone is actually able to do this, that means he's an advanced soul, and he can take disciples all over the world.
Therefore, Srila Prabhupada, in a similar way, Prabhupada is talking about faith. It would seem that faith is just a very simple requirement, but Prabhupada said faith means really, really deep faith, really deep faith. That's what we mean when we're talking about faith. Similarly, when we're talking about sense control, we're talking about absolute control. It's interesting, if you study yoga, at least in the Patanjali system, they actually meditate on every single cell within their body with the intent of controlling it. That's the level of absorption that they seek. And that's just hatha yoga. That's just external yoga. But, to get the kind of vyavasayatmika buddhi that Krishna mentions in chapter 2, it's not so easy thing. And, but it is the currency that by which our faith is measured. So, yeah, faith is not so simple thing, and sense control is also not so simple thing. They're very, very deep things. So then anything that comes from those, the deeper our foundation goes, the higher the building can go, right? So if we have a very deep foundation of faith, if we have a very highly focused, concentrated degree of sense control, then we will be able to make advancement very quickly. This is kind of the subtext here in these early verses of the Upadesham.